As Ancients Awaken, of Saving Raeall, Book 1, by Spencer Edward Smith, created by Spencer Edward Smith and Nathan Norman Smith. Prologue. The cloth draped over her mouth did little to mask the smell of magic and blood, which hung thick like a fog in the air. Obscuring her face now seemed a waste. None would live to tell what they had witnessed. Corinne had never killed anything before. Even the spiders had been afforded leniency, unaware of the terror they induced in her. She harbored no resentment now either, and had already braced herself for what was coming. A gentle wind, stirred up by their presence, caressed the back of her neck. She had worn her hair up, which was unusual. She lifted her eyes to the duel in front of her. Adam had been chosen as well, no surprise there. He had always been Acio's favorite. He was vicious when the situation called for it, and doing so seemed pleasurable to him. She personally never took pleasure in her assignments, though she handled them diligently. Just because death was an inevitability did not mean it was something to be enjoyed or celebrated. She heard the crunch of several ribs snapping like branches underfoot. If the bone had punctured a lung, that would be the end of this fight as well. She had to give the old elf credit. He had served as a sentinel for hundreds of years, as the representative from Brightwood. Reiji Takahiro was his name. Growing up, she had been forced to learn the names and faces of every notable person in Raeall. Never knowing any different, it had seemed like a normal childhood to her. The other followers had each been gifted their own dwarven artifacts meant to match those the sentinels carried, ancient items of immeasurable power. She had needed no such enhancements. When they all trained, she was the one they chased in vain. Her connection to the source was all-encompassing, her wielding of the elements coming as effortlessly to her as breathing. She had once possessed an ego about her talents, but that had been mercilessly beaten from her. Her life was nothing. The magic, though, that was everything. She looked toward what remained of the sentinels. Pitiful. The trap had been set too well, injuring them before the fighting had even begun. It had never been about glory, but this now lacked almost any glory whatsoever. She had thought they were some of the greatest mages in all of Raeall and had been anticipating the challenge. While that was true to some extent, they were only the best mages who were also willing to forsake their personal wealth for the protection of the realms. Only a few of them could even wield all 6 elements. In contrast, 7 of their count were savants, including herself. Who would Acio choose for her to destroy? It was one of the largest advantages they possessed. The sentinels had no idea who they were, nameless and faceless mages. However, Corinne knew everything about them: where they grew up, which artifacts they wore, which elements they could harness, and those that fell outside of their comprehension. Invisibility was one of the most powerful abilities to manifest in Raeall, and their group had a sort of invisibility right now. For all of their heroic deeds, the sentinels had never seen their downfall coming. Watching their friends get executed one by one was making them frantic. For her, if any on her side besides Alexander fell, she would hardly award them a second thought. Friendships made them weak. Maybe the sentinels had a false sense of superiority, that since they were chosen to represent their people, that made them better or stronger in some way. 3 of the sentinels were already dead, their artifacts claimed in turn. In contrast, only one of her fellow chosen had fallen. Claire Reed had been the sole sentinel to come away victorious. She turned her focus back to the fight. Adam threw a small dagger that lodged itself in the elf's leg. It quickly materialized back in his hand while he readied another throw. Reiji had already been starting to slow long before the dagger had sunk into his ankle. The dagger had been a gift from Acio, one of a pair crafted 500 years ago for the children of King Kathael of Eveleth. It would be a lie to say she didn't covet it in some small way. The spell weaving of the elf was a sight to behold, but the mask Adam wore was more than a great equalizer. The dwarven war mask was also an artifact created by Caspar Bent, a human who had lived with the dwarves in their home of Mount Mithril in the years directly preceding the Sundering. Every new creation had been blessed by the gods through his hands, imbued with unimaginable powers. The mask was undetectable presently, as he was currently wearing the face of a man whose likeness he had copied, finding the man either handsome enough or frightening enough to emulate. She had never seen Adam's true face in the 15 years she had lived amongst them. She had only seen him in the mask before, his face unchanged, a vicious and ugly thing that had caused her nightmares for weeks. He had even worn her face and body, perfectly replicating her pale skin and light green eyes, easily tricking Alexander while saying horrible things to the boy. She stole a quick glance at her childhood friend before returning her attention to the fight. She wondered if Alexander would be chosen. Surely he was worthy as well. She didn't avert her gaze, though the finale was gruesome. Adam had recast several of the elf's own spells back at him, one of the hidden powers of the mask he wore. This had set up an opening for his dagger to land once more, this time in the elf's neck, lodging between two vertebrae. The blood sprayed onto the grass around him as he lifted his hand toward his throat, gasping for breath, but finding only the thickness of his lungs drowning in blood. Any number of them could have healed the elf. There were many gifted healers in both their group as well as the Sentinels. But this had been a duel to the death, the same as the previous 4 today. Raeall pulled the dagger out, causing the blood to flow much more rapidly, drenching the collar of his cloak in crimson. The elf had sworn to protect all citizens of Raeall, including her. If there was hurt in his eyes for that, it was undetectable. He slumped over onto the grass. None of his friends stepped forward, and the barrier between them and the gathering dropped. Adam walked toward the elf and rolled him onto his back. He pulled a necklace off the corpse, standing up to admire its beauty in the fading light. Before walking away, he kicked the elf once, the body only shaking lifelessly in response. Raeall may not have felt the attack, but the other sentinels at least felt the disrespect of the act. A sick silence hung over the battlefield. Now 4 of them were on the ground. The Order of Sentinels had not lost this many members during one event in hundreds of years. A young dwarf stood out from the waning group, Tor Stonesoul. He was the most powerful, or would have been on any other day. He limped forward and stood opposite Accio. There were still 2 sentinels who had yet to fight, and the one who had been victorious. They huddled together, whispering amongst each other. "Cowards, the lot of you," Tor said, spitting on the ground in front of Accio. "Corinne, step forward," Accio said. A rush of energy pulsed through her body upon hearing her name. She did as she was told and stood in opposition to the dwarf, at least having been given a worthy challenger. The barrier rose between them and the spectators. The sounds of the night now eerily absent. Her childhood training had culminated in this moment. There were now only 2 options, life or death. "Why have you done this?" The dwarf stared at her, his weapon lowered, a focus of immense power that doubled his already impressive natural abilities. He was much younger than she anticipated. Tor had been a sentinel for several years already, but was still very young by dwarf standards, now reaching the age when one would marry and start a family. "Does it matter?" she asked without much emotion. "To me it does," the dwarf said, still standing calmly. He had either accepted his fate or didn't know he was already dead. "Why would a young girl like you attack us?" She studied him. It would not hurt to be honest. "I have been shown visions of what is to come." It was an answer, but not fully. What had she been shown that would make him see as well? "Terrors are coming, and you would never have been prepared, as evidenced by today. We may still be unprepared ourselves, even after we acquire your artifacts." The dwarf looked down at the artifact on his hip. "So it's for these." He pulled it from its mount, observing the beauty and intricate design. "This is worth killing us over?" She could hear the hurt in his voice. see the pain in the grimace, either from the loss of his friends or the ambush that had left him limping and bloody. She had a twinge of guilt. She didn't need them, though some of the others did. She had glimpsed futures without the Sentinels. How could she explain that those were the few where they even stood a chance? He began to speak, but she interrupted him. "I have seen the Mithril King's hammer return to the dwarves." After much consideration, he finally said, "That's impossible. When the hammer is found, who becomes king of the dwarves? Is his blood truly still amongst us?" She spoke the name as it had been in the visions. His face changed. He looked around at the others, his friends as well as her companions. "I know of whom you speak." He stood in contemplation for a second. "That is a future I wish I could see for myself." His attack was so swift that she hadn't anticipated its arrival. He was one of the most honorable amongst them, and it had been underhanded. Her respect grew slightly as she descended upon him in retaliation. The dwarf had already prepared for her attack, which he easily blocked with a spell of his own. A thick fog obfuscated the battlefield. She moved to where he had previously been, but found the spot abandoned and turned quickly, anticipating an attack that didn't come. Summoning a shield, she used a wind spell to clear the area around her. Placing her back to the barrier, she faced the thick atmosphere that hung in front of her and prepared her rebuttal. She sent a wide arc of lightning into the fog, where it clashed with the dwarf's shield, producing a vivid spark of bright light accompanied by an audible snap. Moving toward him, she cleared the way with another gust of frigid air. Tor was beneath a savant's shield with his eyes closed in prayer. The words were too quick and quiet for her to discern. As she cast a flurry of spells, his shield erupted to catch each one in turn, his lips still swiftly speaking the incantation. When he finished, his eyes opened. His face changed. Peace washed over him, and she could almost sense a faint smile at the corner of his lips. "Make it quick, girl. Long live the Queen." It wasn't what she had expected. Her adrenaline still heightened. She held a hand out toward the dwarf. His skin slowly grayed until finally his eyes hardened over, their luster now hidden beneath a layer of stone. Tor appeared statuesque, as if carved from the surrounding terrain. Her victory had been much more ceremonial than the others, his passing more peaceful as well. The protective dome that guarded non-combatants against stray spells lowered, and she found the rest of the assembled mages in frantic chaos. "Cowards," Accio said as he descended on the remaining sentinels, his voice in anger unusually heightened. What had happened, she wondered. She noticed one of the opposition was missing. The remaining sentinels were bleeding on the forest floor while the last, who had won her fight earlier, was dangling upside down in the air. Claire slowly hovered, her body bound in place by the elements. "I will never bow to you," she said, spitting in the elf's face. "I know," Accio replied, a hint of sadness in his voice.